there's a reason this video exists. And if you saw my last big deep dive, they just don't make movies like this anymore, then you already know this series isn't just about nostalgia. It's about why movies feel and look different than they used to. Why the films from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s still look real. They still feel real. And today we're going to talk about one of the biggest reasons: miniatures. Because for decades, Hollywood didn't just create worlds on computers, they built them by hand. And today we're going to talk about how that lost art and craftsmanship helped movies from decades ago hold up better than movies you saw just a couple of years ago. And that's a big reason why movies look and feel so different today. Let's get into it. Pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, so why do movies look and feel different? Why don't they make movies like this anymore, like they used to? Well, let's talk about filmmaking. And before we get into things like film stock and shooting on film and haptic versus optic and all the other reasons why movies look and feel different, we're going to start with something real and tangible, and that is miniatures, something that was built for real. But let's define what that means. A miniature is exactly what it sounds like. It is a scaled down physical version of something real: a city, a spaceship, a castle, a mountain, a building collapsing. And they're often built in scales, just like any other model: a 1/12 scale, a 1/18 scale, a 1/72 scale, all different kinds of scales, and we're going to get into that. But then they are photographed and composited into live action shots. And here is the key: miniatures are not fake like CGI and green screen stuff or AI. They are real objects shot with real light, real cameras, real things occupying real space. And that is what makes all the difference visually and to our brains when we are watching something in front of our eyes. So let's start with the most famous modern example. Now, miniatures have been around for a long time, but a lot of people really understand them and have heard about their use in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Minas Tirith, Isengard, Rivendell. Some of these models were so massive, the term was coined by the crew Bigatures. That's because they built something so huge that miniature almost didn't really cover it, though it was still a miniature because it's not as big as like the White City of Gondor is a miniature, but it's giant. And they built them big because they knew that the bigger they built them, the bigger the miniature, the more realistic it becomes. You get more detail, you get more realistic textures that you can see with your eyes, and more importantly, the bigger you build them, the more naturally the light behaves on them. That's why if you return to Lord of the Rings, like Return of the King today, it still looks better than any blockbuster that's coming out right now that's using CGI. And we're going to get into eventually why CGI is not holding up the way it used to. Because if you go back to Jurassic Park in 1993, the CGI there and those dinosaurs are much more believable than anything that's coming out today. And if you go back to even Michael Bay's first Transformer film, those Transformers look way more realistic than anything you're going to see like recently in the He-Man trailer, or pretty much anything Marvel is cranking out right now. I mean, compare She-Hulk to Transformers. One looks real, one looks touchable, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to get into that later. But right now, these miniatures, they trick your brain because inside we know it was built. We know it was real. We know it is there. It is physical. The details are real. But like I said, miniatures did not start in Middle Earth. Far from it. They go way back. And when I'm talking about way back, we're talking about, you have George Méliès, A Trip to the Moon. Miniatures have been baked into film and film grammar and just the overall idea of filmmaking from the beginning. Metropolis, even Dracula's Castle, the original King Kong, and they reached their absolute peak in the 70s through the late 90s into the early 2000s with Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, because that Harry Potter castle was a miniature. And that's where you hit the wait a minute, that was a miniature era. And because once you notice them, you can't unsee them, and you start to see them everywhere. But they still look real. They're still believable. They're still buyable. It's not like CGI that is very badly dated and it takes you out of it. No, those miniatures are there. They're real. Blade Runner's opening, for instance, that cityscape is a miniature. Aliens spaceship, that is a miniature. The Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy, every X-Wing fighter, every TIE fighter, every Star Destroyer were miniatures. Hollywood's most iconic images that we think of were hand built. It's almost like there's a connection in our brains and in real life between this movie is timeless and iconic, and yeah, they actually built that. Those two things go together. And when you're talking about Star Wars, we could do a whole video just on that, but they even developed a whole new camera system to go along with the miniatures. It was a motion control system, and because Star Wars wasn't just about miniature filmmaking, it was cutting edge innovation. This is the birth of industrial light and magic. And to create space battles, ILM invented motion control photography. The camera would repeat the exact movements over and over again so they could film the ships in layers. And then you had the explosions, the star fields, and it all optically combined. And it was slow to do. It was difficult, but the results are timeless. It's something that you can go back to now and it holds up. You don't go back to it and say, ooh, that's early CGI or that's rushed CGI and it looks bad and it kind of takes you out of it. No, these things were there. They were real and believable and they hold up because of it. Then you get another spot where miniatures really shine, and that is disaster movies. This is where miniatures get really fascinating because destruction looks awesome on a grand scale created from a small scale. Disaster movies use miniatures constantly. One of the biggest examples was 1974's Earthquake. There used to be a whole ride at Universal Studios that started off with a pre-show that showed you how they use these miniatures. Entire city blocks collapsing, freeways cracking, buildings falling and shaking apart. Those weren't pixels, those weren't CGI, those weren't green screen. Those were physical miniatures being destroyed. Or something I just watched last night, Dante's Peak. This is a more modern example of this. This is peak 1990s Dante's Peak. But the eruption sequence in this, miniature models. The physical effects, almost all of those are miniatures, giant miniatures, but they're real. The debris is real, miniature trucks, all that kind of stuff. And here's why that matters. These movies still hold up better than their CGI heavy hitter disaster films today because the destruction has weight when it is real, when we know that it exists, when we know they blew something up. The same is in Independence Day when they destroy the White House. That is a giant White House that they built to blow up. And they make it look very real in a variety of ways. First of all, they build it with often with the same materials that you would build the full-size thing. So if you're building a model truck, it's probably going to be made out of metal and all these kind of things. If you're building, like in Earthquake, they're building brick walls, they'll use little pieces of the real material, often just on a small scale. So it sells it in every way. And that's why it's one of my favorite things about filmmaking. And it has some secret weapons to help sell it, to make it look even more real. And this is where the true art of filmmaking happens, because camera and cinematography and lighting go hand in hand with these miniatures, because miniatures are often shot at super high speeds. Why? Why are miniatures shot at super high speeds? Because scale changes physics. You never thought you would talk about physics when you're talking about filmmaking, but all of this used to be part of the real art of filmmaking that we're losing.
The models were built at 1/6 scale, as tests proved that objects at this size look more real to the camera, especially when shot at higher speeds.
Now that means that it would be shot much faster, but when you projected it, it was much slower, so that would work to give the miniatures more mass and the feeling of weight, which is necessary.
So if the scale changes the physics of the thing, and you blow up a tiny building at normal speed, it looks like a toy. It's too fast. It's too light. So what do? Filmmakers shoot miniatures, particularly destructions, in high frame rates. They shoot them at super high frame rates, then slow it down. The debris then falls heavier. It has weight to it. The smoke billows out slower. The destruction feels massive. And of course, the sound design plays into here too, tricks your brain into believing that was real, that had weight, that mattered, that was really destroyed. And you can't fake that easily. There's something in our brains now that recognizes CGI. We see it too easy and we immediately know it's not real. Nobody's in trouble. Nothing's really being destroyed. They can just do it over and over again. But back when you were using miniatures and the real art of filmmaking, that was very, very different. And look, miniatures are not just for giant spectacle. If used properly, they can enhance any movie. And some filmmakers use them for style. Look at Wes Anderson. I started thinking about this video recently when I was watching the Grand Budapest Hotel. Miniatures are practically part of Wes Anderson's DNA. He uses them in so many movies and you probably didn't even notice it. But the best example here might be the Grand Budapest Hotel, because the hotel itself, the exterior of the hotel, that iconic exterior, the whole hotel, every time you see it from outside, it's a miniature. It's not CGI. It's not a real building. It is a miniature. And a lot of people are probably surprised to find that out. And what's brilliant is they didn't build it like a toy. It's like I was saying before, they used real world materials, the same textures, the same surfaces that you were going to use if you were going to build the Grand Budapest Hotel at full size. That's what they used, because the materials are authentic. And then the miniature becomes authentic looking. It becomes a cinematic reality. Wes Anderson understands something that modern blockbusters, that modern films in general forget. Miniatures aren't just effects, they're storytelling. They help sell the realism, the real weight and feel and touch of the world to the person who is watching, and that helps engross you in the film even when you don't realize it. So why did miniatures disappear? If miniatures work so well, why did they stop? Well, there's simple answers to this. And they'll first tell you money. But that is not actually true, because as we see, film budgets are growing exponentially. Why? Because of the massive overuse of CGI. That is a part of it. So like He-Man, the new He-Man movie that's coming out, has a budget alone of almost the entire budget of all three Lord of the Rings films. It has a bigger budget than Michael Bay's Transformers. Okay, so that is a cop-out. Why is it a cop-out? Because they want to do it quickly, and they want to have the ability to alter anything at any time in post if they get a bad screening or they get a word from above that says you need to change this or change that. They don't want to commit to an artistic vision. They don't want to commit to anything permanent in the digital space while they're filming. So they just shoot it flat, they green screen it, and CGI whatever they want to later. So they claim it's space and time and money. It's not really those things. It's just trying to rush it out, and they don't want to commit to anything. And we're losing the art of filmmaking because of it. It has now just become, we'll fix it in post. And that is a bad way to live. That takes away all character. That's why all movies feel the same. They look the same because of that. That is a big part of the reason. But they're like, well, why build the castle when we can just make it CGI and I don't have to worry about it right now? Why do that when I can change my mind on what it looks like later? Well, you take away from the actor's ability, because if you're in real space surrounded by real things, if you're on real location and you have this giant miniature and you have a real set built over here, it's much easier for the actor to be in that space and perform. But now it is just easier, it's more editable, we can fix it later, and that is a problem because now our brains, like I said, we know what CGI looks like. And when it's bad CGI, it can turn you off really quick. And with the CGI overuse, everything, even if it's impressive, it feels weightless. It feels like it has no consequence to it. Too smooth. Everything's too smooth, too clean, too polished. Miniatures give you imperfection. They give you happy accidents when they're being built. They give you texture and a realism that your brain responds to. And that's all part of the old smoke and mirrors, the art of filmmaking that is lost. Now, this isn't a anti-CGI rant. I fully believe that CGI is essential. We should use this, but we should use it as an enhancement, not as the whole thing. Again, look at Transformers. Look at Lord of the Rings. Stuff that uses it sparingly to enhance what is really there, that's when all of the best of the old art of filmmaking and the new concepts in filmmaking come together to make something great that could be iconic and last forever. But the best movies understand that, and they use it to enhance, not replace, like those films, like Lord of the Rings, a great example. Transformers, great example. More matte paintings we need too. That helps. More miniatures, more on-location shooting. Physical versus digital, our minds tell the difference. Digital armies layered in with real armies, that stuff helps sell it, but because you have the real with it, it changes everything. And that balance and the art of filmmaking that we had before is lost. You get too many people saying, well, that's outdated, we're not doing that, and they forget what made those films so special that they're still trying to recreate that magic and borrow from them today. And why does it matter? Because miniatures, you could say, well, they're not real either, they're small, but they exist in the real world. They're built from real materials. They're really there. And emotionally, that makes them more real. To our brains' perception, that makes them more real because they exist, because they were built, because they were lit, they were photographed, they were grounded in realism, even if they are fantasy. They anchor the spectacle. They give movies shelf life way beyond what CGI by itself can do. And in an industry that's obsessed with speed and increasingly diminishing the art of filmmaking, they become inconvenient to them. Nobody wants to commit to a vision when they can just change it in post with CGI. So will miniatures ever return in a widespread way? I can only hope so. It's not just miniatures. It's on location shooting, practical sets, and all that stuff is to come. Film versus digital, all that stuff is to come. We're going to get to that. But if this video inspires one young filmmaker, I'm a filmmaker myself. I love the physicality of everything. And don't believe that shooting on location is more expensive. As an independent filmmaker with tiny budgets, I save money by shooting on locations that exist, that I don't have to build, that I don't have to create with CGI. So that is a myth that's running around out there. But it is time for those, if this one person out there that's making films, if they say, you know what, he's right, I'm going to build something again. I am going to create something real again. I'm going to go on a real location and film, then I've done my job. We got to do it one at a time. And we're going to dig into this more, film versus digital, on location, all that kind of stuff. So it's why movies change is not just the effects in them. It's not just the CGI. We're going to go into why this whole craft feels different now, and it's becoming less of an art and more of a computer-generated spectacle. And now with the emergence of AI, there's even less interest in that, in my opinion, and there's going to be less interest in that going forward. If you can make the same thing you see in a big budget movie with a couple of AI prompts, then the difference is going to be in the craftsmanship, the art, the real filmmaking techniques that's lost, that you can't do with AI and CGI. So I think that's what gives us hope for miniatures and real old school filmmaking techniques to make a comeback. But that's what I got for you this time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And if you love this kind of thing, we do movie lists, rankings, recommendations, all kinds of nostalgic series, deep dives into filmmaking and film, all of that. Holidays, pop culture, it is all here because it all goes together and we share it all. It's the biggest thing that can bring us together. If you want to help support that a little more, you can join my Patreon. The link is below. You'll get your name and lights, first of all, on every single video. Behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, members only special videos, and so much more. And I really do appreciate it. It all goes into this channel to support what we're doing here. I'm jumping back behind the camera myself here soon for another film. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. It's Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.